Have you ever seen someone you destroyed, and realized they survived without you? Thorne Ashcroft's world stopped the moment he saw her across the street. Not because she looked different, not because she'd moved on, but because of what she was pushing. A navy stroller. A baby's hand reaching up toward the sky. And that smile. God, that smile he thought he'd killed. His coffee went cold in his hand. The city noise around him faded to nothing. His assistant was saying something about the merger meeting, but all Thorne could hear was his own heartbeat hammering against his ribs. Isla. His ex-wife stood at the crosswalk, adjusting a soft yellow blanket inside the stroller. She looked tired. Beautiful but tired. Her dark hair was pulled back in a messy knot, and she wore jeans that had seen better days. Nothing like the designer dresses he used to buy her. Nothing like the woman who used to wait for him in their penthouse, book in hand, always hoping he'd come home early. The baby made a sound. A gurgle. A laugh. And Isla's face lit up in a way he hadn't seen in years. Thorne's throat closed. Because the last time he'd seen Isla, she'd been walking into a clinic. The last time he'd looked into her eyes, they'd been hollow. Empty. Broken. He'd done that to her. And he'd been so sure she'd gone through with it. The light changed. Isla crossed the street, completely unaware that the man who'd shattered her life was standing 30 feet away, unable to breathe. She disappeared into a bookstore. Thorne didn't move. His assistant touched his arm. Sir? The car's waiting. Cancel the meeting. But sir, the board? Cancel it. His voice came out harsher than he intended. His assistant nodded quickly and stepped back, phone already to his ear. Thorne stood there on that sidewalk for 10 more minutes, staring at the bookstore entrance like it might give him answers. Like it might tell him how to undo what he'd done. But some things once broken don't fit back together. What would you do if you saw the life you destroyed still breathing? Thorne finally forced himself to walk to the car. His driver opened the door, but Thorne didn't get in. He just stood there, one hand on the roof, staring at nothing. Take me home, he finally said. The ride back to his penthouse was a blur. He didn't remember the route. Didn't remember the elevator ride up. He just found himself standing in his living room, surrounded by glass and steel and money, feeling emptier than he'd ever felt in his life. His eyes landed on the photo. He should have thrown it away months ago. Hell, he should have thrown it away the day the divorce was finalized. But there it was, half hidden behind a stack of financial reports on his desk. Their wedding photo. Isla in that simple white dress she'd chosen because she said she didn't need anything fancy. Him in a suit that cost more than most people's cars, looking at her like she was the only person in the world. He'd loved her. God, he'd loved her so much it scared him. And that fear had turned into poison. Thorne sank into his chair, the leather creaking under his weight. His hands were shaking. He pressed them flat against the desk, trying to steady himself, but the image wouldn't leave his mind. The baby. The stroller. Her smile. She'd kept it. She'd kept their baby. And she'd never told him. The realization hit him like a freight train. She'd left the city 8 months ago, and he'd never once tried to find her. He'd told himself it was better that way. Cleaner. She could start over. He could bury himself in work and pretend the guilt wasn't eating him alive from the inside out. But she hadn't started over. She'd become a mother. His mind dragged him back. 2 years ago. Back when everything was still good. Or at least back when he'd thought it was good. The charity gala had been unbearable. Black tie events always were. A room full of people who smiled too much and cared too little, writing checks to feel better about themselves. Thorne had been nursing his second whiskey of the night when he saw her. She'd been standing near the auction tables, arms crossed, studying a painting like it was the most fascinating thing she'd ever seen. She wasn't dressed like everyone else. No diamonds. No couture gown. Just a simple black dress and heels that looked uncomfortable. He'd walked over without thinking. Not a fan of the crowd? She glanced at him, one eyebrow raised. Not a fan of pretending. Pretending? That any of this matters. She gestured toward the room. Half these people will forget they donated by tomorrow. The other half will make sure everyone knows. He'd laughed. Actually laughed. You're not wrong. I know. She turned back to the painting. I'm Isla, by the way. Literature professor. Here against my will. Thorne. Geo. Also here against my will. She'd smiled then. Small. Real. At least we're suffering together. He'd fallen for her that night. Not because she was beautiful, though she was. Not because she was different from the women he usually met, though she was that too. He'd fallen for her because when she looked at him, she didn't see his money or his last name or the empire his family had built. She'd just seen him. And for the first time in years that had been enough. He'd pursued her relentlessly after that. Showed up at her university office with coffee. Sent her books he thought she'd like. Asked her to dinner once a week until she finally said yes. She'd resisted at first. Told him they were from different worlds. Told him it would never work. But he'd been patient. Persistent. And slowly she'd let him in. Their wedding had been small. Just close friends and family. His mother had hated it. Said it wasn't appropriate for someone of his standing. But Isla had been glowing and Thorn hadn't cared about anything else. The first few months of marriage had been perfect. Quiet mornings. Her reading by the window while he worked. Her laugh filling the penthouse when he told terrible jokes. Her body curled against his at night, her breathing soft and even. But then the cracks started to show. His mother's disapproval grew louder. The board questioned why he was distracted. The tabloids ran stories calling Isla a gold digger. And Thorn, instead of defending her, had pulled away. Work became his escape. Late nights at the office. Business trips that lasted weeks. He told himself it was necessary. That he was building something. Protecting what they had. But all he'd been doing was abandoning her. And then one night, 8 months into their marriage, she told him she was pregnant. He remembered the exact moment. They'd been in the kitchen. She'd been making tea. Her hands had been shaking as she set the cup down. "Thorn, I need to tell you something." He'd barely looked up from his laptop. "What is it?" "I'm pregnant." The words had hung in the air between them. He'd stared at her. Waiting for relief. For joy. For anything other than the cold dread that settled in his chest. "Are you sure it's mine?" The question had come out before he could stop it. Her face had gone pale. Then hurt. Then something worse. Something that looked like her heart breaking in real time. "What did you just say?" "You heard me." "Thorn, how could you? How could I?" His voice had been sharp. "Cruel. You've been distant for weeks. You barely talk to me anymore. And now suddenly you're pregnant." "I've been distant?" Tears had started falling. "You're never here. You work 18-hour days. I eat dinner alone every night. I go to bed alone. And when you finally do come home, you look at me like I'm just another thing on your to-do list. That's not fair. None of this is fair." She'd been shaking. "I love you. I've loved you through all of this. And you just accused me of cheating on you. Can you blame me? My father went through the same thing. A woman who claimed to love him got pregnant and turned out the kid wasn't even his. I am not your father's mistress. And this baby is yours. Prove it." She'd stared at him like she didn't recognize him anymore. And maybe she didn't. Because the man standing in that kitchen wasn't the one who'd fallen in love with her. He was someone else. Someone harder. Someone who'd let fear and pride turn him into his worst nightmare. She hadn't said anything else that night. She'd just walked to their bedroom and closed the door. For 3 days she'd barely spoken to him. And instead of apologizing, instead of trying to fix it, Thorn had let his pride harden into something worse. His mother had added fuel to the fire during one of their weekly lunches. "She trapped you, Thorn. Women like her always do. They see money and power and they latch on. Mother, that's not. It's exactly what happened to your father. And look how that ended." The words had burrowed into his brain. And the doubt had grown. He'd hired the best divorce lawyer in the state. Drew up papers. Had them delivered to Isla while she was at work. When she came home that evening, he'd been waiting. "What is this?" She'd held up the envelope, hands shaking. "I want a divorce. Thorn, please. We can talk about this. We can. And I want that baby gone." Her face had crumbled. "What?" "You heard me. I'm not raising a child I'm not sure is mine. So you'll end the pregnancy, we'll finalize the divorce, and we can both move on." "You're asking me to kill our baby." "I'm asking you to end a mistake." She'd looked at him for a long moment. And then quietly, through tears that wouldn't stop falling, she'd said, "You really believe I'd betray you?" He hadn't answered. Because deep down he hadn't known what to believe anymore. She'd signed the divorce papers the next day. Signed the consent form for the procedure. Scheduled the appointment. He'd driven her to the clinic himself. Watched her walk through those doors, her shoulders shaking, her face pale. And he'd left. Didn't wait. Didn't check on her. Just drove back to his office and buried himself in work. 2 weeks later, the divorce was final. Isla had packed her things while he was on a business trip. Left no note. No forwarding address. Just gone. And Thorn had convinced himself it was for the best. Now, sitting in his penthouse staring at their wedding photo, he realized the truth. She'd never gone through with it. She'd walked into that clinic, sat in that waiting room, and then walked right back out. She'd left the city to protect their baby from him. Would you forgive someone who believed the worst about you? Thorn didn't sleep that night. He lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, his mind racing. By morning he'd made a decision. He had to find her. He had to know. The bookstore opened at 9. Thorn was there at 8:45, standing across the street with a coffee he didn't drink, waiting. When the doors unlocked, he crossed the street and went inside. It was small. Cozy. The kind of place Isla would love. Shelves packed with worn paperbacks and leather-bound classics. A reading nook by the window with mismatched chairs. But she wasn't there. Thorn approached the counter, where a young woman with purple hair was organizing receipts. "Excuse me." She looked up, unimpressed. "Help you? I'm looking for someone." A woman with a stroller. "She was here yesterday." The woman's eyes narrowed. "Why?" "She's an old friend." "Right." She went back to her receipts. "We get a lot of people in here." "She has dark hair. About this tall." He gestured. "She was pushing a navy stroller." "Don't know her." She was lying. Thorn could tell. But he also knew pushing wouldn't help. "If you see her," he said carefully, "could you tell her Thorn is looking for her?" The woman's expression shifted. Recognition. Then something close to anger. "You're Thorn?" "Yes." "She doesn't want to see you. You know her. She comes in every week. Buys books for her kid. And she's never once mentioned you." The woman crossed her arms. "So whatever you want, she's not interested." Thorn's chest tightened. "Just tell her I'm looking for her. Please." The woman didn't respond. Just turned back to her work. Thorn left the bookstore feeling more lost than when he'd gone in. He sat in his car for an hour, debating his next move. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. "I need a private investigator. The best you have. I need someone found." By noon, the investigator had sent over preliminary information. Isla's new address. A small apartment complex in a suburb 40 minutes outside the city. Her job. Freelance editor working from home. The investigator included photos. Thorn opened them with shaking hands. There she was. Sitting on a park bench, the baby in her lap. She was reading to him, her lips moving, the baby's tiny hands reaching for the book. Another photo. Her pushing the stroller through a farmer's market, smiling at something someone had said. Another. Her standing in her apartment doorway, holding the baby against her chest, his dark curls visible even from a distance. The baby looked like him. The resemblance was unmistakable. The same dark hair. The same sharp features starting to take shape. Thorn's vision blurred. He'd missed everything. The pregnancy. The birth. The first months of his child's life. And it was his own fault. He drove to her apartment that evening. Didn't plan what he'd say. Didn't think about what he'd do. He just drove. When he got there, he parked across the street and waited. The lights were on in her apartment. Second floor, corner unit. He could see her silhouette moving past the window. She was holding the baby. Rocking him gently. Probably putting him to bed. Thorn sat there for hours just watching. At some point, she came to the window with a cup of tea. Stood there for a moment, looking out at the street. Their eyes met. For one breathless second, they just stared at each other. She didn't smile. Didn't wave. Just looked at him with an expression he couldn't read. Then she closed the curtains. Thorn exhaled shakily and rested his forehead against the steering wheel. She knew he was there. And she didn't want him anywhere near her. He drove home feeling more hollow than he had in months. But he couldn't let it go. Over the next 3 days he kept going back. Not to approach her. Not to knock on her door. Just to watch. To see her with the baby. To see the life she'd built without him. She took the baby to the park every afternoon. Pushed him on the swings. Read to him on a blanket under the trees. She looked happy. Tired but happy. And Thorn hated himself for wanting to be part of it. On the 4th day she didn't go to the park. Instead she showed up at his office. Thorn was in a meeting when his assistant knocked on the conference room door, looking flustered. "Sir, there's someone here to see you." "I'm in a meeting." "She says it's urgent." "Who is it?" His assistant hesitated. "Your ex-wife." The room went silent. Thorn stood. "Excuse me." He walked out into the hallway and saw her standing by the elevators, arms crossed, jaw set. "Isla." She looked furious. "Stop following me." His heart was pounding. "Isla, you don't get to do this." Her voice was low, controlled but shaking. "You don't get to show up now and act like you care." "I do care." "You didn't care when it mattered." She took a step forward. "You didn't care when I told you I was pregnant. You didn't care when I begged you to believe me. You didn't care when you forced me to sign those papers and walk into that clinic. I was wrong. You were cruel. Tears were forming, but she blinked them back. You called me a liar. You accused me of trapping you. You told me to kill our baby. I know. And now, 8 months later, you see me with a stroller and suddenly you want to be involved? Isla, please. That baby has a name. Her voice cracked. And you have no right to know it. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. She turned to leave. Isla, wait. Just, let me make this right. She stopped but didn't turn around. You can't. Her voice was quieter now. Tired. Something stay broken, Thorn? She walked to the elevator. He watched her go. The doors closed. And Thorn collapsed into the nearest chair, head in his hands, the weight of what he'd lost finally crashing down on him. Does he deserve a second chance, or has he lost that right forever? He sat there for a long time, the office around him moving on, people passing by without a second glance. But all Thorn could think about was the look in Isla's eyes. She'd loved him once. And he'd destroyed that. Now, all he could do was hope that somewhere, buried beneath all the pain he'd caused, there was a chance to earn even a fraction of that love back. Not because he deserved it, but because the alternative, a life without her and without the child he'd never known, was unbearable. That night, Thorn sat at his desk with a blank piece of paper in front of him and a pen that felt heavier than it should. He'd written 1,000 contracts. Signed deals worth millions. But this was different. Something stay broken, Thorn. Her words circled his mind like vultures. He couldn't escape them. Couldn't pretend they didn't cut deeper than anything else she'd said. Because she was right. He'd broken something that couldn't be fixed with money or lawyers or time. He'd broken trust. He'd broken love. He'd broken her. And now all he had was this pen and this paper and the faint hope that maybe, just maybe, words could start to repair even a fraction of what he'd destroyed. He started writing. The first line came out shaky. Uncertain. Isla, I don't expect forgiveness. He paused. Crossed it out. Started again. Isla, I don't deserve forgiveness. But I need you to know that I was wrong. About everything. His hand moved faster now, the words pouring out like a confession he'd been holding back for months. I accused you of betraying me when the only person who betrayed anyone was me. I betrayed your trust. I betrayed the vows I made to you. I betrayed the love you gave me so freely, even when I didn't deserve it. I was scared. That's not an excuse, it's just the truth. My father was deceived by someone he loved, and I spent my whole life watching him become bitter and cold because of it. When you told me you were pregnant, all I could think about was that history repeating itself. I couldn't see past my own fear. I couldn't see you. And I should have. God, I should have seen you. You were the only person who ever looked at me and saw more than a last name or a bank account. You saw me. The real me. And I threw that away because I was too much of a coward to believe someone could actually love me for who I was. He stopped, his vision blurring. I thought I was protecting myself by pushing you away. But all I did was destroy the only person who ever truly loved me. I see you with our child now, and I realize you were always the strong one. You survived what I did to you. You built a life. You became a mother. And I was too blind to see that strength when it mattered most. I don't expect you to forgive me. I just needed you to know the truth. That I was wrong. That you deserved better. That I'm sorry. He signed his name at the bottom. Folded the letter. Sealed it in an envelope. And then he sat there, staring at it, unable to send it. Because what good would it do? Words on paper couldn't undo what he'd done. Couldn't erase the pain. Couldn't bring back the months he'd missed of their child's life. But maybe they could be a start. He set the letter aside and made a different decision. If words couldn't fix this, maybe actions could. The next morning, Thorn made a series of calls. First, to the hospital where Isla had given birth. He'd found the records through his investigator. Medical bills that were still unpaid. Thousands of dollars she'd been chipping away at month by month. I need to pay off an outstanding balance, he told the billing department. Name on the account? Isla Brennan. There was typing on the other end. That account has a balance of $8,412. Pay it. All of it. Anonymously. Sir, will need. Send the invoice to my office. I'll wire the money today. But the payment has to be anonymous. She can't know it was me. Pause. Understood. He hung up and moved to the next call. A grocery delivery service. He ordered everything he remembered Isla liking. Fresh vegetables. Organic produce. The expensive coffee she used to drink on Sunday mornings. Baby food. Diapers. Everything she might need. Delivery instructions? The woman on the phone asked. Leave it at the door. No card. No receipt with my name on it. Got it? The last call was harder. He'd found out through his investigator that Isla had been trying to get Cashin into a local daycare. Good place. Small class sizes. But there was a waiting list and the fees were steep. Thorne called the director. I'd like to make a donation, he said. Enough to cover a full scholarship for one child. Isla Brennan's son. That's very generous, but it's anonymous. She can't know where it came from. Just tell her he's been accepted. Mr. Ashcroft. Please. The director was quiet for a moment. Then softly, all right. We'll take care of it. Thorne hung up and leaned back in his chair, exhausted. He couldn't fix what he'd broken. But maybe he could make her life a little easier. Maybe he could carry some of the weight she'd been carrying alone. It wasn't enough. It would never be enough. But it was something. 3 days later, Isla was folding laundry in her living room when her phone rang. A known number. She almost didn't answer. But something made her pick up. Hello? Miss Brennan? This is the billing department at St. Catherine's Hospital. Her stomach dropped. She'd been making payments. She hadn't missed one. Is there a problem? No problem at all. I'm calling to inform you that your balance has been paid in full. Isla froze. What? Your account balance. It's been cleared. An anonymous donor covered the remaining amount. That's not possible. I didn't authorize. It's already been processed. You don't owe anything. She sat down slowly, the phone pressed to her ear. Who paid it? I'm sorry, Ms. Brennan. The donor requested anonymity. The call ended. Isla stared at her phone, heart pounding. $8,000. Gone. Just like that. Who would do that? She knew the answer before she even finished the thought. Thorne. 2 days later, groceries appeared on her doorstep. She hadn't ordered them. Bags and bags of fresh food, baby supplies, things she needed but couldn't always afford. No note. No explanation. Just help she didn't ask for. Then the letter from the daycare arrived. We're pleased to inform you that Cashin has been accepted. A generous donor has provided a full scholarship covering all fees for the year. Isla sat on her couch, the letter shaking in her hands. Cashin was on the floor, playing with blocks, oblivious to the storm raging inside her chest. Isla. She looked up. Linnea stood in the doorway, concern written all over her face. She had a key for emergencies and she'd clearly sensed this was one. What's wrong? Isla handed her the letter without a word. Linnea read it. Then looked at Isla. This is good news. Why do you look like you're about to cry? Someone's helping me. Okay. And I think I know who. Understanding dawned on Linnea's face. Thorne. Isla nodded. Linnea sat down beside her. Why would he do this now? After everything? I don't know. Isla's voice cracked. But I don't trust it. Do you think he wants something? I think he wants forgiveness. And do you want to give it to him? Isla looked at Cashin. He'd grabbed one of his blocks and was waving it triumphantly, his dark eyes sparkling with joy. Thorne's eyes. I don't know, she whispered. Part of me wants to hate him. Part of me wants to scream at him and tell him to leave us alone. But another part. Another part? Another part wonders if maybe he's finally becoming the man I thought he was. Linnea squeezed her hand. Just be careful, okay? You've been through enough. That night, after Linnea left, Isla sat on the edge of her bed with Cashin asleep in her arms. She looked down at his tiny face, peaceful and perfect. Your father is trying, she whispered. I don't know if I can forgive him. I don't know if I should. But maybe he's changing. Maybe. Would you accept help from someone who broke your heart? The question haunted her as she finally put Cashin in his crib and tried to sleep. She didn't have an answer. The following Saturday, Isla took Cashin to the neighborhood park. It was one of their routines. He loved the swings. Loved the way the wind felt on his face when she pushed him gently back and forth. She was humming softly, pushing the swing when her phone rang. A client she'd been trying to land for weeks. She glanced at Cashin, still secure in the baby swing, then stepped a few feet away to take the call. Hello? Yes, this is Isla. She kept one eye on Cashin while she talked, nodding along to the client's questions. Everything happened in seconds. An older kid, maybe 6 or 7, came running across the playground, chasing a ball. He didn't see the swing. Didn't see the chain. He crashed into it full speed. The chain jerked. The swing tipped. Cashin started to fall. Isla's heart stopped. She dropped her phone and lunged forward, but she was too far away. And then someone else was there. A man in a dark jacket dove forward and caught Cashin mid-fall, arms wrapping around the baby protectively. Isla reached them a second later, breathless and shaking. Cashin. The man looked up. It was Thorn. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Cashin was clutching Thorn's shirt, startled but unharmed. His tiny hand gripped Thorn's collar, and Thorn was staring at him like he'd just been handed something precious and fragile. Is he okay? Thorn's voice cracked. Isla took Cashin from his arms, checking him over frantically. He's fine. He's fine. Thorn stood slowly, hands still shaking. Thank you, Isla said stiffly, not meeting his eyes. Thorn didn't move. He just stood there, staring at the space where Cashin had been in his arms. For those few seconds he'd held his son. And it had broken something inside him. You can go now, Isla said quietly. But Thorn didn't move. Isla. His voice was barely a whisper. I don't want to go. She finally looked at him. Really looked at him. His eyes were red. His hands were trembling. He looked like a man who hadn't slept in days. You've been following us. I know. I'm sorry. I just needed to see him. To see you. You don't get to do this, Thorn. You don't get to play hero after you destroyed us. I'm not trying to play hero. His voice broke. I'm just trying to be here. Even if you hate me for it. Isla's chest tightened. She wanted to hate him. God, she wanted to. It would be so much easier if she could just hate him and move on. But standing there looking at him, seeing the raw pain in his eyes, she realized the truth. I don't hate you, she said softly. I wish I did. It would be easier. She turned and walked away, pushing the stroller. But this time her steps were slower. That night, Cashin wouldn't settle. He was fussy, crying softly no matter what Isla did. She'd fed him. Changed him. Rocked him. But nothing worked. Finally, she gave up trying to put him down and just held him, pacing the small living room while humming the lullaby her mother used to sing to her. Her mind kept drifting back. To the park. To Thorn's face when he'd held Cashin. To the day everything fell apart. She'd been terrified that day at the clinic. Sitting in that waiting room, surrounded by other women with their own stories, their own reasons. She'd signed the consent form because Thorn had demanded it. Because she'd been too heartbroken to fight anymore. But when they called her name, she couldn't move. Her hand had gone to her stomach, where their baby was growing. So small. So fragile. And she'd known in that moment that she couldn't do it. She'd left through the side door, trembling so hard she could barely walk. Got on a bus heading north and didn't look back. She'd ended up in a small coastal town, staying with a distant aunt who'd asked no questions. She'd worked odd jobs to pay for her medical care. Cleaned houses. Waited tables. Edited manuscripts late into the night. And when the contractions started, she'd been alone. No partner. No family. Just a midwife and her own stubborn will to survive. The pain had been unbearable. She'd screamed until her voice gave out. Cried until there were no tears left. But when they placed Cashin in her arms, tiny and perfect and crying, she'd known it was worth it. Every moment of pain. Every sleepless night. Every sacrifice. It was worth it. She'd named him Cashin because it was the name she and Thorn had talked about once, lying in bed late at night, talking about a future that felt impossible now. If we ever have a boy, she'd said, I like the name Cashin. Thorn had smiled. Strong name. I like it. What about a girl? Anything but Vivian, he'd said, and they both laughed. The memory made her chest ache. Isla looked down at Cashin, finally asleep in her arms, his breathing soft and even. She carried him to her bedroom and set him gently in his crib. Then she knelt beside her bed and pulled out a box from underneath. Inside were all the things she'd kept. Ultrasound photos. The hospital bracelet from the day Cashin was born. A few photos from her wedding. And a letter. She'd received it 3 months ago. No return address. Just her name on the envelope in handwriting she didn't recognize. But inside had been a letter from Thorn. She'd read it and cried for hours. His assistant had sent it, the accompanying note explained. She'd felt guilty about what happened and thought Isla deserved to see it. Isla had read Thorn's letter 100 times since then. Had memorized every word. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I need you to know that I was wrong. About everything. She traced the words with her finger now, tears falling onto the paper. Why couldn't you have said this when it mattered? She whispered into the empty room. Is it ever too late to tell the truth? She didn't have an answer. All she knew was that Thorn was trying. And part of her, the part that had loved him so completely once, wanted to believe he could change. But the other part, the part that had survived his cruelty, wasn't sure she could risk it. Thorn sat in his office long after everyone else had gone home. The only light came from his computer screen, where old security footage played on loop. He'd never deleted it. Couldn't bring himself to. There she was. Isla. 2 years ago. In their kitchen, dancing while she made breakfast. Her hair was down. She was wearing one of his shirts. She looked happy. He watched himself walk into frame, wrap his arms around her waist, kiss her neck. She'd laughed. Turned in his arms. Kissed him back. "You're going to be late for work," she'd said. Let them wait. The footage cut to a different day. Different memory. Her face falling when he'd accused her. The light leaving her eyes. The way she'd looked at him like she didn't recognize him anymore. Then the divorce papers. Her hand shaking as she signed. Thorne couldn't breathe. He grabbed his laptop and threw it across the room. It hit the wall and shattered, pieces scattering across the floor. His chest was heaving. His hands were in his hair. For 8 months he'd been trying to hold it together. Trying to stay composed. Trying to convince himself he'd made the right choice. But he hadn't. He'd destroyed the best thing that ever happened to him. And now, watching those memories play out, the weight of it finally crashed down. Thorne Ashcroft, the man who never broke, who never showed weakness, who'd built an empire on control and precision, broke. He collapsed into his chair, head in his hands, and sobbed. When he finally caught his breath, he grabbed his phone and called his mother. "Thorne? It's late. What? You were wrong." His voice was raw. About Isla. About everything. His mother was silent. "She never betrayed me. She never lied to me. And I destroyed her because I listened to you. Thorne, I was trying to protect. You were trying to control me. Like you always do. And I was a fool for listening. Don't speak to me that way. I'm your mother. And Isla was my wife. The woman I loved. The mother of my child. And because of you, I lost her." He hung up before she could respond. Next he called his divorce lawyer. "Mr. Ashcroft, is everything? You're fired." "Excuse me? I don't want your services anymore. Send your final invoice. We're done." He hung up. Then he accessed his bank account and transferred his entire annual bonus to a women's shelter. $50,000. In Isla's name. It wasn't enough. Nothing would ever be enough. But maybe it was a start. Finally Thorne got in his car and drove. He didn't have a plan. Didn't know what he'd say. He just knew he couldn't sit in that office anymore, surrounded by the ghosts of everything he'd destroyed. When he reached Isla's apartment building, he parked and walked inside. Second floor. Corner unit. He stood outside her door for a long time, hand raised to knock. But he couldn't do it. What right did he have to knock on her door? To ask for her time? To ask for anything? So instead, he sat down on the hallway floor, back against the wall, head in his hands. He didn't know how long he sat there. An hour. Maybe 2. At some point he heard footsteps inside. A baby crying softly. Isla's voice, gentle and soothing. The crying stopped. And Thorne just sat there, listening to the life he'd lost happening on the other side of that door. It was past 2 in the morning when the door finally opened. Isla stood there in pajama pants and an old sweatshirt, Cashin on her hip. She looked exhausted, surprised, and something else. Something he couldn't quite read. "What are you doing here?" she asked quietly. Thorne looked up at her. His eyes were red. His voice was hoarse. "I don't know. I just had nowhere else to go." She should have slammed the door. Should have called the police. Should have done anything except what she did next. But instead she stepped aside. "You have 10 minutes. Would you let him in or walk away forever?" Thorne stood slowly, legs stiff from sitting on the hard floor. He walked into her apartment and she closed the door behind him. The space was small but warm. Nothing like the penthouse they'd shared. But it felt more like home than anywhere he'd been in months. Isla set Cashin in his playpen, then turned to face Thorne. 10 minutes, she repeated. "Then you leave." He nodded. They stood there in her tiny living room, the weight of 8 months hanging between them. And Thorne realized this might be his only chance to say everything he should have said all those months ago. So he took a breath. And he started talking. Thorne took a breath and started talking. They stood in Isla's small living room, the silence between them heavy enough to suffocate. Cashin slept peacefully in the next room, unaware of the storm brewing just beyond his door. Isla's arms were crossed. Her face was unreadable. But Thorne could see the tears forming in her eyes, could see the way her jaw was set, bracing for whatever he was about to say. He'd rehearsed this 1,000 times in his head. But now, standing here, all those carefully chosen words fell away. All he had left was the truth. "I don't have excuses," he said quietly. "I was cruel. I was wrong. And I will spend the rest of my life regretting what I did to you." Isla's arms tightened around herself. The tears spilled over. You didn't just hurt me, Thorn. Her voice shook. You made me feel worthless. Like I was something disposable. Like I didn't matter. You were never disposable. His voice cracked. You were the only real thing in my life and I was too scared to admit it. She looked away, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. I loved you, she whispered. Even when you hated me. Even when you accused me of betraying you. Even when you told me to kill our baby. I still loved you. Thorn's chest felt like it was caving in. I know. The words barely made it past his throat. And that's what makes it worse. You deserved so much better than what I gave you. You deserved trust. You deserved kindness. You deserved someone who would fight for you instead of against you. She finally looked at him and the pain in her eyes nearly broke him. Why are you here, Thorn? What do you want from me? I don't want anything. He took a careful step closer. I just want to be a father. I want to know my son. And if you'll let me, I want to prove that I'm not the man who hurt you anymore. Isla was quiet for a long time. She stared at him, searching his face for something. Truth maybe. Or sincerity. Or just a reason to believe him. You can't just show up and fix this with words. I know. He nodded. So let me show you. Let me prove it. Day by day. However long it takes. She wiped her eyes again and when she spoke, her voice was steadier. If I let you into his life, you don't get to disappear. You don't get to hurt him the way you hurt me. You don't get to decide one day that this is too hard and walk away. I won't. The words came out fierce. I swear on everything I have, Isla. I won't walk away. Not from him. Not from you. She studied him for another long moment. Then slowly she nodded. One chance, Thorn. That's all you get. Relief flooded through him so powerfully he almost collapsed. Thank you, he whispered. She didn't respond. Just turned and walked to the kitchen, putting distance between them. But she hadn't told him to leave. And for now that was enough. The first time Thorn visited, Cashin was terrified of him. The moment Thorn walked through the door, Cashin burst into tears and reached for Isla, burying his face in her shoulder. It's okay, Isla murmured, rubbing his back. You're okay, sweetheart. Thorn stood frozen in the doorway, heart sinking. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to scare him. He doesn't know you yet. Isla's voice was gentle but firm. You have to give him time. So Thorn sat on the floor, a respectful distance away, and waited. Isla set Cashin down with his toys, and the baby immediately crawled to the other side of the room as far from Thorn as possible. Thorn didn't push. He just sat there quietly watching. After a while he picked up one of the picture books scattered on the floor and started reading aloud. His voice was soft, steady, non-threatening. Cashin peeked at him from behind a stuffed elephant. Thorn kept reading. By the end of the visit, Cashin hadn't come near him. But he'd stopped crying. It was progress. Thorn came back 2 days later. And 2 days after that. Each time he sat on the floor and read. Sometimes he just talked, telling Cashin about his day in a gentle voice, even though the baby didn't understand a word. Isla watched from the kitchen, arms crossed, her expression carefully neutral. But Thorn could see the way her shoulders relaxed a little more each time. Could see the walls around her heart cracking just slightly. 3 weeks in, something changed. Thorn was reading a story about a giraffe who couldn't find his spots when Cashin suddenly crawled over. Thorn froze. Cashin tugged on his sleeve, babbling something incomprehensible, and held up his stuffed giraffe. Thorn's eyes filled with tears. He took the toy like it was made of glass. Thank you, buddy, he whispered. Cashin just stared at him with those big dark eyes, then crawled back to his blocks. Thorn looked up at Isla. She was standing in the kitchen doorway, one hand pressed to her mouth, tears streaming down her face. Their eyes met. And for the first time in months she smiled at him. Over the next few weeks, Thorn learned what it meant to be a father. He learned that diaper changes were harder than they looked. The first time Isla asked him to try, he put the diaper on backwards and had to start over while Cashin kicked and giggled. Isla laughed. Actually laughed. The sound was so unexpected, so beautiful, that Thorn stopped what he was doing just to stare at her. What? She said, still smiling. Nothing. I just forgot what your laugh sounded like. Her smile faded a little, but she didn't look away. Well, don't mess it up again. He learned that babies had a sixth sense for when you were tired. The nights he was exhausted from work were the nights Cashin refused to sleep, fussing and crying until Thorn walked him around the apartment, humming off-key lullabies. He learned that baby food was disgusting and that making it from scratch was apparently a skill he didn't possess. The first time he tried, he burned the sweet potatoes so badly Isla had to open all the windows. How did you burn sweet potatoes? She asked, half amused, half horrified. I have no idea. They ordered takeout instead, and Cashin ate store-bought puree while Thorn sat on the floor feeling like a failure. But Isla didn't mock him. She just handed him a container of applesauce and said, "Try this one. It's easier." He learned that falling asleep with a baby on your chest was the most peaceful feeling in the world. One evening after a long day, Thorn sat on Isla's couch with Cashin in his arms. He'd been reading a book, but his eyes had grown heavy. The next thing he knew, Isla was gently shaking his shoulder. "Thorn, wake up." He blinked awake to find Cashin fast asleep on his chest, one tiny fist clutching his shirt. "Sorry," Thorn whispered. "I didn't mean to." "It's fine." Isla's voice was soft. "But if you don't move soon, he's going to wake up cranky." Thorn carefully shifted, and Isla took Cashin from his arms, carrying him to his crib. When she came back, she sat on the opposite end of the couch. "You're good with him," she said quietly. Thorn looked at her, surprised. "You think so?" "Yeah." She tucked her legs under her. "He trusts you. That's not easy to earn." "I'm trying." "I know." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. Then Cashin's voice came from the other room. Not crying. Just babbling. And then clear as day, "Dada." Thorn's heart stopped. Isla's eyes went wide. They both rushed to the nursery. Cashin was standing in his crib, holding onto the rail, looking directly at Thorn. "Dada," he said again, reaching out his arms. Thorn couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Isla was crying, her hand over her mouth. "He said it," Thorn whispered. "He called me?" "Yeah." Isla nodded, tears streaming down her face. "He did." Thorn picked Cashin up, holding him close, and for the first time in over a year, he felt like maybe, just maybe, he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Subscribe so you don't miss what happens when love gets a second chance. 6 months passed in a careful dance of healing and rebuilding. Thorn had proven himself consistent, reliable, present. He showed up for every visit. Never missed a scheduled day. Never made promises he couldn't keep. And slowly Isla's walls came down. They started having dinners together. Nothing fancy. Just takeout on her couch while Cashin played on the floor. They talked. Really talked. About everything they'd been too scared to say before. Isla told him about the pregnancy. About how terrified she'd been. About giving birth alone in a small clinic in a town where she knew no one. Thorn listened, his chest aching with every word. And he told her the truth about his father. About the betrayal that had shaped his entire view of relationships. About the fear that had turned him into someone he hated. "I'm not making excuses," he said. "I just want you to understand why I was so broken." "I know," Isla said softly. "But you can't let his mistakes define your life forever, Thorn." "I'm trying not to." One evening Vivian showed up. Isla opened the door and immediately tensed when she saw who it was. "What do you want?" Vivian stood in the hallway, perfectly composed in a designer coat and heels. "I want to see my grandson." "You have no right." "I have every right. He's my blood." Before Isla could respond, Thorn appeared behind her. She texted him the moment she saw Vivian, and he dropped everything to get there. "Mother." His voice was cold. "Leave." Vivian looked genuinely shocked. "Thorn, don't be ridiculous. You poisoned me against her." He stepped between Vivian and Isla. "You made me believe she was lying. You told me she trapped me. And I lost everything because I listened to you. I was protecting you." "No." His voice was sharp. "You were controlling me. You've been controlling me my entire life. And I'm done." Vivian's carefully constructed mask cracked. For the first time she looked almost vulnerable. "Thorn, I only wanted." "I don't care what you wanted." He opened the door wider. "If you want to be part of Cashin's life, you'll apologize to Isla. Not to me. To her." Vivian stared at Isla. Pride and guilt warred on her face. Finally, quietly, she said, "I'm sorry." It wasn't much. The words were stiff, formal. But it was something. Isla studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "You can visit. Once a month. Supervised." Vivian's jaw tightened, but she nodded. Then she turned and walked away without another word. Thorn closed the door and turned to Isla. "I'm sorry. I should have done that years ago." Isla reached out and touched his arm gently. "You did it now. That's what matters." More months passed. Thorn was now a constant presence in their lives. He had a key to Isla's apartment. A drawer in her dresser for the nights he stayed late and fell asleep on the couch. A spot at the table during meals. They'd fallen into a rhythm that felt almost natural. Almost easy. But there was still a distance between them. A careful space neither of them had been brave enough to cross. Until one evening. They'd just put Cashin to bed and Isla had made tea. They sat on her tiny balcony, the city lights spread out below them. Thorn was quiet for a long time. Then he set his cup down and looked at her. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure." He hesitated, then, "Do you think one day you could forgive me? Not just for Cashin's sake, but really forgive me?" Isla was quiet. She stared out at the lights, her expression unreadable. "I don't know, Thorn. Some scars don't fade." "I know." He swallowed hard. "But I'm not asking you to forget what happened. I'm just asking if maybe one day you could let me try again. Not as your ex-husband. Just as someone who wants to be better. For you." She looked at him, searching his face. "Are you asking me to take you back?" "No." His voice was soft. "I'm asking if you'd let me earn my way back. Slowly. However long it takes. No pressure. No expectations. Just a chance to prove that I can be the man you deserve." Tears fell, but she was smiling. "You're already doing it, Thorn. You just don't see it yet." He exhaled, relief and hope flooding his face. She reached over, hesitantly, and took his hand. He held it like it was the most precious thing in the world. "Do you believe people can truly change?" Drop a comment. 1 year later. Thorn and Isla had moved into a new place. Not his penthouse. Not her tiny apartment. Something in between. Something that felt like theirs. It was a modest house on the edge of the city, with a backyard big enough for Cashin to run around in and a kitchen with windows that let in the morning light. They weren't remarried. They talked about it, but Isla wasn't ready yet. And Thorn understood. What they had now was better than any piece of paper. They were rebuilding. Slowly. Carefully. With intention and honesty. Cashin was walking now, toddling around the house with the fearless confidence of a child who'd never known anything but love. Thorn chased him through the living room, laughing as Cashin shrieked with delight and ran toward Isla. She scooped him up, spinning him around while he giggled uncontrollably. Thorn watched them from the doorway, his chest full of something he couldn't quite name. Gratitude maybe. Or peace. Or just love. "I used to think love was about control. About pride. About being right. But love isn't any of those things. Love is showing up. Every single day. Even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard." Today was Cashin's second birthday. They'd kept the party small. Just Linnea, who'd become like family. Vivian, who came bearing gifts and a stiff but genuine smile. And Thorn's assistant, the woman who'd sent Isla the letter and given them both a second chance. The living room was decorated with simple streamers and balloons. A cake sat on the table, 2 candles waiting to be lit. Isla carried Cashin over, his eyes wide with wonder. "Ready to make a wish, sweetheart?" Cashin clapped his hands, not understanding but delighted anyway. Thorn stood beside her, his arms slipping around her waist. She didn't pull away. She leaned into him. They sang Happy Birthday terribly off-key while Cashin laughed and reached for the cake. Isla helped him blow out the candles and everyone cheered. Later, after everyone had gone home, after the dishes were washed and Cashin was tucked into bed, the 3 of them lay on a blanket in the backyard. The night was clear. The stars were out. Cashin was between them, already asleep, his breathing soft and even. Isla looked up at the sky, then at Thorn. "We made it," she said softly. "We did. I never thought we would." "Neither did I." He turned his head to look at her. "But I'm glad we fought for it." She rested her head on his shoulder. "So am I." They lay there in silence, the 3 of them together, under a blanket of stars. And Thorn realized something. This was what love looked like. Not the grand gestures. Not the expensive gifts or the perfect moments. Just this. Showing up. Being present. Choosing each other. Every single day. Even when it was hard. Especially when it was hard. The screen fades to black. Text appears. Forgiveness isn't about forgetting. It's about choosing love over pain. Every single day. If this story moved you, hit subscribe. More love, more truth, more second chances coming soon.